Hi, I'm Ben Murdoch, the Songwriter Coach. Now in the last video, I talked about the secret ingredient for writing original lyrics. Check it out if you haven't already seen it. In that video, I also said there isn't a secret formula for writing a great song, which is true. A whole song is just too complex a thing to be boiled down and simplified to an equation. But songwriting is a process. And guess what? Certain chunks of the process can be given a formula. Now I'm going to talk about one of those chunks right now and then give you the formula at the end. So this chunk is all about how to write powerful lyrics by generating meaningful raw material so your listeners will really feel something. Why meaningful? Because what we say in our songs needs to mean something, or to put it another way, it needs to make sense. Now as humans, we use our senses, which is sight, touch, hearing, smell and taste, to make sense of the world all around us. So it's perfectly logical then that if we want our lyrics to work, we need them to mean something. We need them to trigger a response in the listener. So we should consider using our senses in our writing so that the listeners can feel what we're saying. The formula I'm going to talk about today, I have named the sense formula. And at the end of this video, I'm going to tell you how to get hold of my free sense formula ebook. This isn't a new idea, by the way. This idea of triggering a response in the audience goes back to a time before the birth of Christ. The Greek philosopher Aristotle called it catharsis, which in his native tongue literally meant vomiting up or purging. Now the ancient Greeks loved to watch drama on the stage to make them feel something so they could be purged of their emotions. It was cathartic and cleansing for them, just as it is for us today. Catharsis is brought about by drama and words in perfect balance. So you could give that process of producing a reaction in the audience its own formula. It would be drama plus words equals catharsis. Now let's jump to 1919 to meet the American poet T.S. Eliot. Yes, he is the one responsible for the lyrical content of Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats. But he's also responsible for what I call the sense formula, co-written with Aristotle this time rather than Lloyd Webber. Now if Aristotle called the reaction catharsis, T.S. Eliot called it a sensory experience. He believed the only way to express and evoke emotion in art and cause this sensory experience was to find something to take on the appearance of the particular emotion that you're trying to write about. It could be an object or a situation. Really, it could be anything. Think of how Seal uses a rose in his song Kiss from a Rose to describe life-changing and life-giving love. Here he's chosen an object to represent what he wanted to convey. Now a rose is a delicate and beautiful thing, and it's used by Seal here to contrast with the grey that he's painted, describing his own life. So I imagine a picture where only the rose is in colour, but soon it's going to colour the entire world around it, bringing its beauty and life to everything that it touches. So T.S. Eliot called this way of using an object to help carry or convey an emotion objective correlative. Now that term's a bit complicated for me, so I'm going to look at renaming it. So I see it as using something to represent the emotion that we want to trigger in the listener. So let's rename this objective correlative representative trigger. So we can now start putting all of this together and lay it out as a formula. So first off, we know that sensory experience is the end result. So it's going after the equals sign. We also know that the first thing that we need to find in this equation is the representative trigger, something which represents the feeling that we're looking to evoke or trigger in the listener. So that's on the left-hand side over here. But what do we need to add into the middle here to achieve this sensory experience? Well, the only way to pull the trigger in this whole formula is by using sensory language, i.e. language that's going to appeal to the senses of the listener so they tap into what you're saying because it fires their own senses, helping them relate to it. Without sensory language, the whole thing will fall flat. What if Seal, using the example from before, hadn't compared his subject to a kiss from a rose, just a rose? It's going to lose all of its impact, and a kiss is very sensory, of course. Another way of looking at this is that the trigger really only fires if sensory language is used. So here it is, the sense formula. Representative trigger plus sensory language equals sensory experience. Aristotle backs this up and gives an interesting new dimension and technique to consider. If you remember, his formula was drama plus words equals catharsis. This is classic show and tell. Aristotle was the father of show and tell. So in his equation, drama is showing. We even call a TV program or a theatre play a show, and words, of course, tell. And the order is important. Drama first, telling afterwards. Show, then tell. Think of it like a school show and tell. So if a young girl takes her new puppy to school and she begins by telling the class she has a new puppy, the kids are going to be interested but not entirely engaged. But think what would happen if before even saying a word she picked out of the crate the tiny puppy. There'd be gasps of excitement, hands raised in the air for questions, and children crowding around the puppy to feast their eyes on the young dog and hanging on every word that the girl says. And this is exactly what you're aiming for, or we're aiming for, when we write lyrics, for the listeners to feast their senses on the lyrics that we've written. So this all makes sense because emotion can't be directly said. It needs to be evoked. You can't just tell someone to feel your sadness or your happiness or your heartbreak. You need to show them. Now, pulling a puppy out of a crate is one thing, that's easy. And using words to get a reaction is going to take more work. So we need to carefully choose our words if we're to move someone. Here's a lyrical example of something that's going to evoke nothing in the listener. Baby, when you left me, you broke my heart. So the emotional response to that, for me at least, listening to it, would be very little. Why? Because it's obvious and it's cliched. It's like explaining that stinging nettles sting. So my head immediately thinks, so what? And if that's happening, something is missing and something's going wrong. So when a listener says, so what, it's a really bad thing. But actually, as writers, it can be used to our gain as an analytical tool to fix our lyrics before they're ever heard or read by anyone else. But there's more on that another time. What the listener really wants to know is how you really feel. Why is this thing so important that you've chosen to sing about it? So think about a musical film that you may have watched. When did the dialogue flip from speaking into singing? It will have been at a point of high importance or emotion when simply saying the lines wasn't quite enough. And that's why lyrics are important. It's fair to say that a good melody will probably carry some fairly poor lyrics, but why even go there? Why risk it? Let's get the lyrics right so that they fit the music perfectly. So in summary, to make people care, you need to trigger a response in them. One of the best ways to do this with lyrics is to find something to represent what you're wanting the listener to feel, and then trigger that emotion by the use of your sensory language. This way, the listener's senses are brought into play, and you can make them feel it and really experience it. Now, at the beginning of this video, I mentioned my free ebook, The Sense Formula. So this free ebook dives deeper into the topic, covering how to use the formula if your song isn't specifically about love or emotion, and how lyrics can control the mind of a listener. If you want to grab yourself a copy, head over to the website, which is www.thesongwritercoach.com/books. There'll be instructions there of how to get hold of the book. And I'll also put a description link below. If you want to hear more from me, then please do subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. In the next video, I'm going to be looking at the 7 senses. I nearly got it wrong, 7 senses. So we know there's sight, sound, taste, touch and smell, but there are 2 more, 2 bonus senses that I'm going to be talking about as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all again soon.